You are now listening to the I Think I Love My Wife podcast. And this is your best friend's best friend, Chidozie Okafor, ready to take you on another journey. Are you with me? Because I'm ready. Let's get it. In this episode, part 1 of our bonus 10-part mini-series, I talk about how and why I started my podcast. I share some of my family background and how it impacts me. I talk about how I get people to be vulnerable on the podcast, and I dive a little bit deep into my previous relationship history and how the podcast may have helped or hurt it. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Chidozie. Appreciate you guys for joining for another episode. This time, based on your feedback, I'm giving you guys a little bit of what you guys wanted. I know you wanted to hear a woman's perspective, and you wanted to hear about me. And I think that you guys wanted to hear from a wife, but I have something even better before I get to a wife. And that's Brittany Gwen. She has her own podcast called Girl Talk with Pops, where she does something very similar to me. And also has conversations about relationships, but from a perspective of father-daughter dynamic, which I think is also very valuable. So she's here with me today. Say hi.
Hi, everyone.
And we're doing like a combo joint podcast, so that's super exciting. And she's going to interview me, so I'm going to be on the other side for a bit. And then we're going to have a conversation about different topics that we both experience as two people that are not currently married. And so like I do with every interview, I like to start it with a toast. And so I have my drink. I'm drinking some wine today. You know, I changed it up. And what are you drinking?
I actually am drinking a blood orange juice with Hennessy because they didn't have lemonade.
I was about to say, if it's just juice, we have to change that. But great. And so this toast is going to be to different perspectives and the continual search to find your forever partner. So cheers.
Cheers to that.
All right, cool. So I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to let you handle it. And I'm going to be in the interviewee spot. So you got it.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking the time, Chidozie. I'm super excited to chat with you about your perspective because your podcast has done a great job of sharing other men's perspective on love and dating and relationships. But I think it's really interesting to hear from you because you have all of this wealth of knowledge now, but you also have your own perspective, which I think your listeners might want more of. And Girl Talk with Pops gives me my own perspective from my father, who has wisdom in his age, from a very raw and candid perspective. But I am so curious to hear from other men on love and dating and relationships in life. So thank you for having me, number one.
No problem. I'm glad we could do it.
Yes, finally. But we're here. So I want to start by getting more information about you and how your podcast came to be, how I Think I Love My Wife came to be. But I want to start sort of from your family structure, because I think that's a really important piece of everybody's story. And I know that you often ask your guests how their family structures was. So what's your family structure like? And how does that play into, or how did that play into even coming up with the idea for I Think I Love My Wife?
My parents have been married for, it will be 30, how old am I? I'll be 30. 37 years in May. And so
wow.
All I know is, if I know anything, it's, what it means to be a husband and what it means to be a father through the modeling that I've seen, as well as what it means to be a wife and a mother. And on top of that, I add this context because I'm going to start asking the same question. And it just came from a recent episode, is that I think the sibling structure matters as well. And so I'm one of 4. I'm the oldest boy, have an older sister and 2 younger brothers. And so, it just kind of came in the conversation that sibling dynamic also impacts how you may see relationships too. So I give you that extra nugget.
Okay. I was actually going to ask if you have any siblings. So you have 3 other siblings, oldest boy, 1 girl, which is also really interesting.
Yeah, she's the oldest.
Okay, she's the oldest. So, oh, that's, yeah. I mean, that, and what's the age difference?
Oh, so we're all 2 years apart, except for my youngest brother.
Okay.
He's 8 years. I call him the oops baby, but he's 8 years, 8 years younger than me. 6 years younger than my younger brother.
Okay, gotcha. And you mentioned that you feel that the sibling dynamic also impacts like our point of views on dating and love. And can you share a little bit more about why you feel that way?
I think just how you guys operate, things you have to figure out as a child, whether it's how to share, how you talk to each other, and the different ways that we talk. So on the episode that we launched, excuse me, it came up that like if you grew up in a situation where you just had brothers, how you're used to talking to people is going to be one way versus if you have a sister and a brother, right? Or if you're a woman and you grew up with all sisters, the way someone may talk to you, you may not be accustomed to someone loving you and still talking to you in kind of a aggressive or tough manner unless you had a brother. And as well as like the topics that you've seen your brother either go through as he's getting older and dating, some of those things become more norms in your, I guess in your perspective than if you haven't seen that growing up or didn't have any like boy cousins and vice versa. And I think in addition to that, if you're a twin versus an only child, those things bring different dynamics, and then those specific relationships also impact how you see the world and how you have a relationship with other people.
I agree. And it's funny because I have two siblings, two younger sisters, but both of them, we all have different sets of parents. So my parents together don't only have me, but I have a younger sister on my mom's side and a younger sister on my dad's side. And both of them are so much younger that we never grew up in the same household together, except for my sister on my mom's side, but she was born when I was in high school. So I essentially grew up as like the only child, and I didn't have any brothers. I had cousins, a ton of cousins, very close relationships, but I didn't have anybody to share with. I didn't have anybody to like negotiate with, debate with. But I did have my mom and my stepfather. And I think that that definitely impacts like how I think about and deal with other people. So that's a really great point.
Yeah. And I'll just add, just if we're, I try to foster and encourage people to be vulnerable. And like, I think it's important to share the stories, even though we don't like, especially from Black families, don't like to put your business out there. But that's how other people learn from hearing these things. And so for me and my sister's relationship, we're kids, just like me being a jerk and her being the way she is, and some of the cultural norms that we had, like we just didn't get along for a long period of time. And like we're working to like rebuild that relationship. But like I know personally that because of how I've seen certain things or how I perceive certain actions and how our relationship has been built, that carries over into how I do relationship and things that I either look for or don't want, or, things that might trigger me in a different way that someone else may not be as sensitive to. So I think all those different dynamics like impact how you see the world and how you receive what other people do, towards you.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. On the family note, do your siblings or parents actually listen to your podcast, or have you gotten feedback from them about it?
I think my younger brother does. My baby brother, I don't know. That's a good question. I should ask him. I think he might have. I think my older sisters probably has listened to a couple of episodes. My parents know about it, but they're not like the most tech savvy, and so it'd be a whole like tutorial to just teach them how to get on the podcast cast app. But my mom's actually like a licensed professional counselor, so she like works with families and works with people, and so I'm always curious to see like what her perspective would be, but I don't think she's listened to it yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, so your mom is sort of in this space of helping families and relationships and talking to people about their lives and their love lives, which is really fascinating. Is that a part of what inspired you to start Think Love Wife, or what's your story? And I'm asking because I don't think you're married. You're not married,
No, I'm not
right?
married.
And you're not engaged.
I'm single.
Right?
For those that are listening.
Right. Okay. So it's fascinating to me that you have a podcast that features married men and you're not yet on that journey. So I'm curious to hear sort of like what inspires you to start it and what's the story behind it.
I mean, growing up in the environment I grew up in is like someone that grew up where, like, I guess both parents have been very educated. And so, in the same way where college probably wasn't a big deal to them, they knew they were going to college. It was about which college and all that kind of stuff. For me, being married, being a husband, and being a father was the same way. Like, it's something that I always knew would happen or want to happen because that's all I knew. I didn't see anything else. All the different family constructs pretty much that was around me growing up was married, like a husband and a father, or a mother and a father, and they were all together. So I didn't grow up seeing that. And so I didn't know. I mean, you see it on TV, but I didn't know. And so my sister used to do like this. I think she still does it, but she would do these events at her house where she called D4. It was like dinner, discussion, dessert, and something else, another D. But basically, we would have like kind of conversations that you normally don't have with your friend. And so this was more intentional conversations over dinner. And every time they would always go back to like get on relationships, because I think that's people just love talking about it. Yes. And you get these people in the room and they're just talking about all these different things. And it's like, come on, bruh. Or come on now. Like, you're not, like, if you're in it, you're not going to have this same kind of outlandish perspective. And I think I always try to be very like reasonable and practical in the way that I like think about things. And so like several women in the that group would say, "Charles, you should like write a book because like you always have really good advice and things of that nature." And so I thought about doing that, and then I'm like, well, no one knows me. I don't have credibility. I'm not married to write a book, and it takes a lot of time. And so I kind of like shelved that idea. And then I was in a serious relationship, and I was very intentional about talking to people that were married, like when I had issues. And fortunately, a lot of my friends are married or recently married. And so I would talk to them and get perspective. And sometimes I'll be over the phone and stuff, but like whenever we were together, there would be other guys there and like they're dating or whatnot. And it'd just be this long conversation that people were highly engaged in. Some women would come and it'd just be a really good conversation with their perspective. And so I think with the D4 situation and that, it was like, hey, this could be helpful for a lot of other people that really want to get the context and perspective for someone that's in it. That's like in the same age, range, that's kind of going through some of the things that they're trying to navigate themselves. And that's what pretty much started it.
I see. So the D4 discussions were co-ed, right?
Yeah, co-ed. Yep.
Okay. Oh, that's really fascinating. So you are sort of just expanding on that conversation and really elevating it, which I really appreciate. I agree that a lot of people like talking about relationships. And I also agree that, we should be more forthcoming and vulnerable about our life experiences, because you truly can help someone else. Your story can help someone else and give other people perspective on their own situations, be it in marriage or dating.
No, exactly.
I want to. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, though. I want to double click on the dating piece and the marriage piece, because sometimes there is this adage that, you keep your issues inside the home. You don't really, you don't air out your dirty business or dirty laundry, whatever the saying is. So it's interesting that you have been able to cultivate or nurture that type of openness that is actually effective. But I wonder if that has come up. Like, are people actually super vulnerable? Or do you find that there is some walls that you have to break down? And on one end, you want to get help, but on the other end, it's like, are you letting too many cooks in the kitchen? Does that make sense?
In terms of my podcast?
Yeah, in terms of your podcast or just relation and this type of discussion that you've had. Because I don't think that most people are that vulnerable, even though we want them to be. I find it hard for people to really just like share what is wrong or what's hard or challenging about their relationship, because they don't want to air out their dirty laundry, or they don't want everybody in their business.
Yeah, and we live in this Instagram world where like we want to project the most positive things that we can about people about
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. And so I think like twofold or in two ways, having the conversations were probably easier because one is like not recorded.
Mm.
It's amongst friends, and guys typically keep it real with each other about like, either giving advice or things that they've dealt with. And so it's not like this is going to the world. And so in that conversation, especially among trusted friends, like we could be very real and candid with each other. I think on the podcast sense, it was hard in the beginning trying to sell the idea, the concept when they haven't heard it before, to know like what the feel would be and things of that nature. And so I think what's helped me is that I started with people that I've known for over 15 years and trust, except for like the last couple
Mm-hmm.
people. But these are people I had really good, strong relationships with, and so that helps. And then two, I kind of have a set of I guess rules, so to help I guess maintain a level of confidentiality. And so you'll find out that we never say the person's last name. We also never say like the wife's name. We always refer to her as like my wife, my girlfriend at the time, her, she, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it also helps that my policy is that once I like finish recording and produce it, I let the both of them listen to it because I want to get the green light from both of them. And so they go
Okay.
back and hear it. If there are things that like come up or issues, then we can talk through like what makes the most sense to get it released. So I always got to get the green light from both parties. And then we're drinking. So, later on, people kind of forget that we're recording. And so we're just, we're talking. And so I think all those factors help people feel more comfortable in the process. But, you do run into barriers because I think, my goal here is to like, I'm not trying to break anybody up, right? And you don't
Right.
want to rehash things that people have worked hard to overcome. That might be a trigger for someone. And so I think, as any guy that's protective of his relationship and himself, not trying to get into trouble, they're mindful of, the depth in which they could talk about things. And they probably could go deeper than they're going. But I think given that the benchmark is so low in terms of what people are used to hearing, that we're able to have, find a happy medium. But it's not that everyone's like content gets released. So I have an interview that, for example, that is really great content. It's like 3 episodes. We talk about a lot of things that just deal with like the black men's psyche in general, in terms of career, in terms of relationship. And then like the last episode gets into like a dynamic of his relationship where there was some infidelity and but prior to the marriage, but in the relationship. And I haven't got the green light to release it yet. And so that's something that hasn't been released yet because like I want to make sure that both parties are comfortable. And if we need to re-record some parts or do whatever, I want to make sure that we do that to have the full picture there so that everybody's comfortable. And so it doesn't always work out that, I release everything that I record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine that happening. And I mean, it takes a lot to really be that raw, honestly,
Yeah.
and that vulnerable. It really does. Like, there's really no getting around it because it impacts you, the person, and their relationship and how they feel about it. And sometimes those things are actually not fully processed or not fully healed. So I definitely
Yeah. And
understand
people
that.
are also thinking about how they're going to be, like, because some people they know may hear it, they put two and two
Yeah.
together that are closer to the circles. And so people are also concerned about what other people may think. And so it's also one of those things like I get it, right? But it's one of those things I think the more that I get people on here and sharing, the more that it gets normalized, right? You're not like one person that something happened to. You see that it's happened to like multiple people, and which is kind of the point because I think a lot of times we do relationship even though we have a community in isolation. So you may be dealing with something and you think like, wow, I'm the only one that's like, this is happening to, or this is annoying. And one of the biggest questions that I would ask my friends, like, is this me? Or am I going to deal with this like with everybody, every woman that I meet? And so that's probably the best perspective is that sometimes you may be dealing with the issue with someone and you think it's just that person. And then you get real perspective that nah, this is gonna come regardless of who you're with. It's just something that happens with a woman. Or I'm sure on the flip side is something that you're gonna have to deal with a guy.
Right, right. And I want to touch I want to touch a little bit on your past, and we'll talk about your dating life in a bit. But you said you were in a long-term relationship or in a relationship before?
Yes, I was in a relationship before.
That sounded very PC.
That
Okay.
answers your question, but
How
yeah,
long
what
was
do you
that
want to
relationship?
know?
Go ahead.
No, so what do you want to know? I don't know how far back you want to go. So
Well, I guess your podcast launched in the fall.
yeah.
And I guess I'm curious to know when or how long that relationship was, and if it had any bearing on your thought process and planning out the podcast, or how you decided to like put together the programming. Because ultimately, this is serving people, your audience, and other women and men and marriages, relationships, etc. But I also believe, as a fellow podcaster, that some of this is serving ourselves, in the
Most
sense that
definitely.
we want to pull out and understand certain things because we can relate to them.
Yeah, of
So
course.
that's the context for me
Yeah,
asking.
I guess I'll go back. So like, it's not about one person in particular, but so
Okay.
like my history in terms of like dating, I was a person that like in college, I wasn't trying to like be anybody's boyfriend. I was like, living my life, and it was less of a function of like, oh, I wanted to just have fun and live that life, even though it was fun. But I think early on in my development, I just realized how important like that relationship is, right? And so if I wasn't
Mm,
in a mindset to like do what I needed to do, then I didn't want to do it at all, right? And I think in college it's easy to get into the routine. Oh, you got this person, they pick me up from here, we do this, and you get into a routine really quickly. And like there's a lot of responsibilities and that come with that. And I think I recognized that, so I was like, I'm just not here for it, right? And so I didn't
mm-hmm.
wasn't in really any. There's some people I cared about a lot, but there wasn't any like super serious relationships in college. And then I was a consultant, so I was traveling a lot after that. And so I think that's hard for people to like understand someone that has to like come back on a weekend and everything has a time block, especially when you're trying to
Yep.
get to know someone. And they haven't been in that world before. And so I'm traveling every week. I knew I was going to grad school. I'm studying for like these exams. So I just didn't have time for it. And then so when I get to business school, I'm like, okay, I'm getting more serious. And so I was in a serious relationship for almost a little over a year in business school. Someone that like I thought could like go to the distance. It didn't work out. Then I moved to Dallas after business school, and I was probably single for a year and a half. But that time was really like, when they say like mental health is important and making sure that like your tank is full. I think I
Mm-hmm.
tried to like be in that relationship as much as possible to the point that like it emptied my tank. And so I really didn't have a lot to give people, for a while. And I was very upfront about it. I was like, hey, you gotta get back on the saddle. I'm happy to like get to know you, but right now I'm not in a position to like to give you anything because my tank is like so empty. And
Yeah.
so around the time I would say, I guess my tank was in a better position, through a friend, I got connected to someone and we dated for about almost 2 years, and that ended. And it was really on some adult stuff. Like I think it was a situation where I just wasn't sure that was like I would be happy the way I want to be happy in a marriage. Even though I felt like we got along well and we could get married and do it, I just felt like at that time we both had things that we needed to learn or figure out, and being in the relationship and continue to do what we were doing wasn't going to help that. And so I had to make the decision, as tough and I'm not 100% sure if it was the right decision to do it. And so ended that. And I think the podcast came in while I was trying to navigate that. And so there were conversations I was already having with people in my circle around advice, perspective, and things like of that. And so I guess you could say the podcast was an extension of that, but it wasn't those conversations that led me to make the decision that I made. There were already conversations that I was having, and probably more specific to like what I was going through,
Yeah.
that gave me perspective or helped me kind of think through things in a more like practical way to make a decision.
Gotcha. I think the first part of what you're saying about you really having what I would call maturity, for lack of better words,
Y'all hear
in
that? I'm
like
mature, y'all. I'm
undergrad
mature.
is
No, I'm
like
playing.
really fascinating and cool.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like I was like the saint, so I don't want to make it seem
Right,
like,
right, right.
but I was very, and as a man now, I would say like, you understand that, like, I guess when interacting with women, it's not just about what you say, that if you're being responsible, you have to know your actions also speak. And so I was very much in the, like, I told you what it is. And so, like, you can't come back at me and say I didn't know, but you also have to recognize
Hmm.
now that, like, actions speak too. And so I wasn't like saying like I was a saint out there, but I was very clear for the most part of like, this is what it is.
And that's what I'm talking about, because I think that is very, very important. And honestly, an undergrad, pretty rare. Because that's all that I think you can ask of a person, especially when that's not your partner and that's not your boyfriend, is really the truth and honesty. And I mean, I hate to say this, but I don't think that's the norm. So shout out to you for that. I think that's great.
I appreciate that. I wish we had more time, but we don't. Tune in for the second episode of our 10-part mini-series. It's out now. Go ahead and listen to that. On that episode, we're going to talk about protecting your tank and recognizing when it's empty. We'll also go a bit into the responsibility of other people's feelings, the way people sometimes rush through relationships, and reconciling one's clock with letting things flow. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the I Think I Love My Wife podcast and follow us on Instagram at ThinkLoveWife. Be sure to tell a friend, leave a rating and a written review to let us know what we're doing well and how we could be better. Until then, I hope the conversation keeps going.